Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. All right, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Priscilla Rice. I am a math coordinator at the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools, but a couple months ago, I was a classroom teacher and a site coach in a first grade classroom, so I am still very much a teacher at heart. So I'm very excited to talk to you today about universal design for learning and making sure that we are intentionally planning to design learning for our students. And we're thinking about them whenever we're doing this. So I dropped the link into the chat box for the presentation, and I went ahead and pinned it so you can go ahead and follow along. Throughout the presentation, there's going to be a couple of links that you can click on and access. So it might be a good idea to go ahead and open that up. But just to let you know, there is a chat box that you are more than welcome to interact with me on. I'm actually going to have you respond to a few slides in the chat box. And then if you look at to the right of it, there's a Q&A section that you are more than welcome to drop questions into. And I'm going to end about 10 minutes prior to 7:50, so about 7:40, so that I can stop and answer any questions that you might have. So feel free to use that Q&A section. If you accidentally put it in the chat box, we have our amazing helper, Heather, here, who's going to move it into the Q&A section for us. I love that you guys are all coming in and saying hello. Hello, I'm so excited. Okay, so to go ahead and start off our learning intentions and success criteria. So what we're going to do during this presentation is we're going to learn about the universal design for learning so that we can design mathematics instruction that supports the learning of the primary mathematics for our youngest learners. And our success criteria, what we're going to be successful with by the end of this presentation, is the primary guidelines of UDL, apply some high leverage practices and strategies that can really help to support lesson design, and compare and evaluate our understandings of the content and curriculum. So before we begin, I'm going to drop a poll into the presentation. So feel free to answer it in the poll section. There's a question that asks, how familiar are you with UDL? So your three options: I've heard about it, but I don't know much about it. Your second option: I use it frequently, or you are using this session as a refresher. So you've heard of it before, but you just want to get some new ideas for it. So if you can go ahead and respond to the poll, that would kind of get me a feel of where everyone's at with UDL. Give you guys a complete it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so many of you have said that you've heard about it but don't know much about it. So perfect. This is a great intro to UDL. Okay, so to start, I want you to look at this image. So I want you to imagine something. Imagine you walk into a clothing store to buy a new outfit and everything in the store looks exactly the same. There's no colors, there's no expression of self, and every single thing is one size fits all. How would you feel in that store? Would you be excited to shop there? Would you be excited to walk out with your bags of clothes? So a lot of our education system is built like this. Education should not be a one size fits all. We have a variety of students who have various challenges, various needs, and personalities. I'm sure you guys know, for those of you who are educators, when you walk into a classroom, it's different every single year. All of our students are different, and they need to have what they need when they come to school so that they have the best opportunity to be successful. Now, switching to this, what do you notice and what do you wonder? I'm going to give you a moment to look at this picture and type some things in the chat box. What do you notice and what do you wonder about this image? So as you're working on your responses in the chat box about what you notice and wonder, I want you to think about the panels. Think about if these panels were intentionally created like this, or if they were by accident. Think about if they were supposed to be separated. Think about what you could apply to this image. So then now think about if we had, okay, I'm starting to see some responses. I noticed some colors I prefer over others. There's variety, the meaning of the colors, they're blended. I love it. Exactly. So I want you to think about had a student in our classroom and we showed this image and the student didn't see color. Would they be able to access this activity in the same way? Probably not. We need to understand that our students learn in different ways. They're not going to be able to see things in the same way as other students. And it's our job as educators to make sure we're designing those learning environments so that they can be successful. Each year, we get a new group of students who come from a variety of backgrounds, cultural influences, challenges, and skill sets. So do they need a one-size-fits-all curriculum? We need to think about how we can plan for each and every one of our learners with their individual needs in mind. So this is where Universal Design for Learning truly steps in. We should be designing learning opportunities to help our students be successful. So let's first go ahead and discuss what UDL is. So I'm going to give you a second to read about what Universal Design for Learning is, and then I'll go ahead and talk through these bullet points. So Universal Design for Learning is a way for thinking about teaching and learning that helps to give all of our students an equal opportunity to succeed. It's an approach to teaching that's aimed at meeting the needs of every student in our classroom, and it can be very helpful for all kids. It's also a set of principles for designing curriculum that provides all individuals with an equal opportunity to learn. So we're going to do a little activity that will help you develop of what UDL is a little more. Okay, so if you need to see this slide a little bit bigger, you can access the presentation, or I dropped one in the chat box that you can go ahead and click and take a look at this. So what you are expected to do in this is I want you to go ahead and examine all 4 of these cartoons or illustrations, and I want you to try and match a foundational concept to a cartoon. So our 4 foundational concepts for UDL are that variability is the norm, it's predictable and it can be planned for, context matters, barriers are in the design, not the learner, and the goal of UDL is not just content knowledge, but expert learning. So which one of these images can match to those foundational concepts? I'm going to give you guys about a minute to do this individually. And if you want to share some ideas in the chat box, you can. So if you just joined us, we're matching foundational concepts to each cartoon. Okay, so it's been about a minute. You may have noticed that some of the foundational concepts are applicable to more than one image. Hopefully, you noticed that there is no one right answer because some of them fit into multiple. For the first one, variability is the norm. It's predictable and it can be planned for. No one fits into a little box, which makes our classrooms or our environment predictable, and we can understand what we can plan for, especially if we've been working with students or children for multiple years. You are aware of some of the challenges that might come into your classroom or your childhood center that you're working in. That you can kind of know what you can plan for. What are some things that you anticipate students will struggle with or will need help with? So that's the first foundational concept. The second one, context matters. Things may feel different in different settings or contexts. For example, if you are someone who likes to listen to music while you work, so maybe you're putting on music for students to work with. I'm sure you've understood or can tell that not everyone is able to focus with music on, and it could be a little more distracting. So planning for that context matters. Barriers are in the design, not the learner. This one was the one that was probably the most powerful for me to understand as an educator, was that it's not the learner who has the problem. The students are not broken. It's the design of the content. So if you're teaching a lesson and if 80% of your students are not understanding the lesson or the content being provided, as an educator, we need to I do as the adult to make sure that these students have access to the curriculum. How can I teach it in a different way where there won't be 80% of my students who are struggling with it? I want 80% of my students to get it and understand it. So what can we do to set our students up for success? The fourth one, the goal of UDL is not just the content knowledge, but in the expert learning. So in math, we often get stuck with the idea that things can only be done in one way. But we need to really empower our learners and show that it can be in more than one way. So for the next few minutes, this is ideally what I would like to do. We're going to explore the framework and essential elements of UDL. You have a couple of options. You have a choice board here, okay? So you have an option to work on your own by clicking that link, which I did drop in the chat box. You have the option to watch a video on UDL. Ideally, I would have opened a breakout room divided by grade level to allow you to talk about what you already know about UDL or what you hope to implement into your lesson design. And you'd also have the option to work with me and listen to me discuss the UDL framework as the presenter. But since we only have a short amount of time together, 45 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and explain UDL. But you are also more than welcome to click the framework and follow along with me or even watch a video while I go through it. So before I start unpacking this, what evidence of UDL do you see in just this choice board alone or even any of the presentation that I've done so far? So I'm going to give you guys a minute. What evidence already see? So you guys can feel free to respond in the chat box once you have an idea. I love it. Choices, 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 options. Choices, yes. Are students still able to access? If you guys were the students, would you still be able to access UDL by me providing this choice board? I love it. Somebody says they don't see the link in the chat. If The very top, I pinned to the presentation. You can click that link. Choices to pick the way we feel like learning. I love that you said that because that is going to be a really big thing that we talk about as one of the components to UDL. Okay, so thank you for responding. This was a small sample of what UDL could look like in the classroom, but obviously I tailored it to match what I'm doing today with you. I wanted to provide various opportunities because some of our learners are visual. Some need to process alone. Some need to hear it. Some need to talk through it with a partner. So having these options available for our students really helps them to engage in the learning and be excited to participate in it. So in UDL, there are three big principles, which are to provide multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression. So I'm going to go through each of these components. So this is the framework, and that is what is in the presentation, but I'll go ahead and drop a link again in the chat box if you want to take a closer look at this while I go through it, okay? So the framework is outlined in these guidelines. When we're providing multiple means of engagement, we want to help students recruit interest so that they can sustain persistence and self-regulate. This means we're giving them choice so that they have more buy-in. So just like what you saw with that choice board, if students are able to see that they can choose what they want to do for the day, they're more excited to do it, and they're still able to access the learning in the same way, but they chose to do it. Fostering goal setting is a big part of this, collaboration and community to help them build on what they're already working on. And we also want to motivate them through positive reinforcement, self-reflection. So that's a big one. We know how well positive reinforcement works with our students, letting them know, like, that was a fantastic choice that you did that. I can't wait for you to explore this learning for the day. And then reflecting. How did you feel about that? Are you going to make the same type of choice next time? Or are you going to try to access it in a different way? The middle column, the purple column, multiple means of representation, entails that we're providing options for perception, language, symbols, and comprehension. This could be done by displaying things in various ways, such as anchor charts. That was my favorite one to do as a math teacher in an elementary setting. Every time I taught a new chapter or even a lesson, meaty lesson, I would create an anchor chart so that students could have a reference that they could look at. It could be videos, it could be auditory information. We can illustrate their multiple use of media or clarify their vocabulary or symbols that are presented in the lesson. The last column, providing multiple means of action and expression, means that we're providing opportunities for physical action, expression, communication, and executive functions. So varying the methods of response or giving them access to more tools. So if we're able to allow them to submit their assignments in different forms, such as they could submit their assignments digitally. Maybe for their math problem, they don't want to write it out in numbers, so they might want to do a visual representation where they draw it out. I don't see harm in that, or even have them show you with manipulatives. These are all ways that we can assess or summatively to see if the students really get it. And they're in turn getting more access to that curriculum because they're able to show it to you in the way that's comfortable for them. Okay, so that was a lot, but here is the overarching goal of UDL, which we are really going to dig into for the next portion of this presentation. So, Universal Design for Learning is an approach to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all by setting clear, rigorous goals, anticipating barriers, and proactively designing to minimize those barriers. So this definition of UDL really resonated with me. And we're going to go ahead and focus on these three areas, okay? So the rigorous goals, anticipating barriers, and proactively designing to minimize those barriers. to show you how you can do these 3 things when you're planning for instruction with your students. So when we think about UDL and we think about designing for our learning, we need to first look at it through the lens of our standards. So I went ahead and took a first grade standard, and we're going to unpack it. And then the next few slides, I'm going to show you how we can use it to have rigorous goals, anticipate barriers, and proactively design to minimize those barriers. So our standard is going to be about using place value understanding and properties of understanding to add and subtract. So it's NBT, numbers in base 10, 5. Given a 2-digit number, mentally find 10 more or 10 less than a number without having to count and explain the reason. So what do students, I'm going to ask you guys a question to respond in the chat box, okay? So to access this standard, given a 2-digit number, mentally find 10 more or 10 less than a number without having to count, and then explain your reasoning. What do students already need to have knowledge of to be successful with this standard? So let's think about that. If we want students to be able to use a 2-digit number to find 10 more or 10 less without having to count and explain their reasoning, what do they already need to come with? What do they need to be able to do to even start this standard? Go ahead and type that in the chat box. Okay. They need to have knowledge of a number chart. Counting by 10, definitely. That's a big part. They need to know how to count by 10. Yes, understanding our base 10 system. Know that the first number will go up once. Concept of more and less, definitely. They need to know what the words more and less mean. I love it. You guys are saying exactly what I wanted you to see in this standard. So when we're looking at standards, we need to look at what the students need to know, knowledge of, so that they can even access this standard. Yes, experience with manipulatives. I love manipulatives. Okay, so to sum it all up, to access this standard, students will need to understand what a 2-digit number is. They need to know what 10 more and 10 less means. They need to have addition and subtraction foundations of it. And they also need to be able to explain, so to justify their reasoning. How did you get that answer? What did you do? And explaining it. Great comments in the chat box. Thank you guys so much for interacting with me. Okay, so the first one, goals. Okay, so well, the first thing we need to do when we know what we want to teach is we need to set some learning goals so that the students are invested in their learning. This is something that I do with the students. So I use the language of learning intentions and success criteria because of a book from Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey, which is called the Teacher's Clarity Playbook, which is fantastic for breaking down standards. But here are some multiple ways that learning goals or learning intentions could be presented. So I was a write it on the board type of teacher. I always had it ready for them when they walked in. So the whiteboard picture is actually from my own classroom. And then some of my colleagues liked to do it on slides. So they did their learning intentions and success criteria on their slides. So the learning intention is what we want the students to know. And the success criteria, they should be able to, this is what they're going to be successful by the end of the lesson. So, with this standard, we need to anticipate barriers. So, we need to remember that barriers exist in the environment and in the variability of the learners. So, we need to plan for our learners who are walking into our classrooms. And it's really important for us as educators of deficit thinking. So, just like our students can get negative mindsets, it's really easy for us as educators too, as well. And I've totally been guilty of it. Instead of thinking this student is too far behind for me to catch them up, instead we can think something like, what can we do to help this student be more successful? It's really important for us to focus on things that are within our control instead of things that are outside of our control. So because we work so hard as educators, it's easy to focus on things that are outside of our control. For example, this student never gets to school on time, they're not doing their homework, nobody's working with them at home. It's easy to focus on things, but those are things we can't control. So what can we control? Well, we can control what's happening in the classroom. We can control how the student gets access to the curriculum. We can control how we're presenting the learning to the student and how we're giving them multiple ways to be able to be successful with that. So when we're thinking about minimizing barriers, we can always think of this question: what can we do to minimize these barriers? Well, to be able to do that, we need to have a good understanding of teacher clarity. So I could do a whole hour talk on teacher clarity and John Hattie's research, but because we're only here for our 45 minutes, I'll tell you that teacher clarity is a really powerful tool for narrowing and focusing activities, cutting away aspects of instruction that don't help the learning. So there needs to be a reason for why you're doing everything. Everything needs to be intentional. Something I used to always tell my students is we never do anything in this classroom for no reason. There's always a reason. We're doing this because it'll help you with counting by tens. We're doing this because it's going to help you when you get into double digit subtraction. So just letting them know like things are not just to do, but they're for a purpose. Teacher clarity is the bridge between what you need to teach and how you plan to engage your students in that learning. When we are designing our lessons, it's important to think about these 4 key questions. What do the students need to know, understand, and be able to do? So what are we going to do? What do we want the students to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? What type of formative assessment are we going to use? What will we do if they didn't learn it? And what do we do if they already know it? So here is a way I would design a lesson to minimize barriers. So I'll remind you of the standard. The standard was 2-digit number, mentally find 10 more and 10 less than a number without having to count, explain the reasoning used. So here are some ways that you could support this in the lesson. And I would have all of these tools available in my classroom for this lesson so I could give them to students as needed or allow them to choose what they want to do. I always have a hundreds 20 chart. There's so much you can do with one of those. Anchor chart, having an anchor chart up and a math toolkit filled with manipulatives that they can touch, they can work with. And then a video. This is Jack Hartman. I don't know if you guys have seen him, but if you're in primary, the kids absolutely love him. He does so many math videos that are so engaging for kids. And then if they're working with counting, here are some different ways you can help them access that. So they can do counting collect with the little puff balls. They can access it through technology, through games. They can do it with manipulatives where they're counting here's another anchor chart. So just some ideas of ways you can implement this. So the ultimate goal with lesson design is we want to activate prior and background knowledge. So understanding students bring experiences from home and from prior learning. So when I asked you in the beginning with the standard, what do students need to know to be able to access this standard? Well, that's when we're activating what they already know. We knew that students probably already knew what the word more or less was. So how can we connect that to their learning? After we connect it, we want to go ahead and extend it so that we can help them really dig deeper into the standard. And we're extending not in the sense where this is too hard, I can't do it, but we're extending it to a challenge where they can be successful and learning. So here are some ideas. Like I said with the 120 chart, I always have these. I've had it in my classroom from first through fifth grade. You can still use it in fifth grade with games. So students can practice counting, skip counting, counting by tens with any number. So of course you want them to start with the tens column first, but then later on they can move on to go 7, 17, 27, 37, 47, letting them see that relationship and how the 120 chart works so that they can use it to help them. We can activate their knowledge by having them find the relationships or notice things on the chart with the relationships of numbers before you tell them what they are. When we connect this to their learning, if our standard was to mentally find 10 more or 10 less to a number without having to count, how can we use our 120 chart skill? Can students see that if they put their finger on the number 25, that the row right below it is 10 more, or that the row above it is 10 less? Can they make that connection? Could they use an expo marker and maybe box those to see the 10 more or 10 less? So this can really be a stepping stone to help them see the connection before they can do it mentally, because we always want to scaffold. We don't want to just expect students know to know it right away. So then lastly, to extend. When we extend, like I said, we want to challenge them. So we're not going to the next grade level. We want to just dig deeper into that standard. So for example, if we give them the number 25, instead of doing 10 more, can we ask them for 11 more? So they learn to just slide down and go over one. Can we ask them for 9 more, 9 less? Extend with the hundreds 20 chart. And then just to kind of give you the progression of what you can do when you go into the upper grades, if you ever do, or if your students are ever ready for it, something that I used to do with fourth graders is I'd tell them to put their finger on the largest 2-digit number, which would be 99. And then I'd say things like decrease by 30 or increase by 10. Decrease by 2, just using that mathematical language, add, subtract. You can do so much with the hundreds 20 chart. It's so useful to have, even if you have like a quick 10 minutes at the end of the day, even 5 minutes at the end of the day, to have students interact with a 120 chart to just gain that number sense. So to end, I just want to revisit our learning intentions and success criteria. And this is something I would do with my students by the end of the lesson. Bring it back, see if we were successful, see if we can check off those boxes. So our learning intention was to learn about the universal design for learning so that we can design mathematics instruction to support the learning of primary mathematics for our youngest learners. And I was hoping that by the end of this lesson, we could understand the primary guidelines of UDL. We can apply high leverage strategies and practices that support lesson design, and we can compare and evaluate our understandings of the content and curriculum. So hopefully we were able to check off all 3 of those boxes. And if not, you can let me know in the evaluation. And here is my ending message. The magic of UDL is really, truly that everyone can learn. And this is a quote by Katie Novak, which I actually linked her video in that choice board. She is a big UDL person, and she has great videos that you can go ahead and watch. So I want to end, and I said I would leave 10 minutes at the end for questions. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for attending the session. You can feel free to drop your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A section. There is an evaluation form for you to check out that Heather just dropped in the chat box. And then at 7:50, you are expected to return to the main session to listen to closing remarks. Okay, thank you so much. So now this last 10 minutes is just for questions. And there's my email as well, in case you guys want to email me any questions. put that quote back up there. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Anna, for saying that. Thank you guys so much. And then remember, I have the presentation linked in the chat box if you guys want to make a copy and borrow any slides. Thank you guys so much for all the nice comments. You guys are amazing. Someone said they'd like to hear a little more on this topic. In our county, we have a lot of people who do present more on UDL. If you want to send me an email, I can get you in contact with them. Lots of good reminders. Yes. I love it. Thank you guys so much for coming. What inspired your interest in universal design? That's a great question. Universal design is a huge thing that is starting to be talked about more now in the education world. A lot of people in here said that they were doing something similar to it, but they just didn't have a name for it. I think naturally as educators, we do differentiate for our students. If a student is having trouble accessing a certain content or trouble accessing any type of thing, we'll always find a different way. So we'll naturally either pull them to the back table, give them manipulatives, give them some things. So when I found out more about universal design, it was exciting because I never thought about doing it or just having those choices available before the lesson even started. I would kind of, as an educator, I would more problem solve in the moment rather than plan ahead of it. So when I found out more about universal design for learning, it was so exciting because what a great idea, right? Plan for it before it happens. Sounds simple, but just putting a name to it and having that idea makes a big difference. So now that I'm out of the classroom, I always say I want to go back just to try some of these things that I'm learning now because it's such a great way to help the students be successful. Thank you for asking that question. Thank you so much. I'm reading these comments. They're so nice. Thank you guys. I'm going to go ahead and pin that evaluation because it looks like some of us are having trouble finding it. So it should be at the top now, right there. Yeah, it's under Heather where it says, please click the link below. Thank you, Patricia. I'm glad it helped. Thank you, Crystal, Jennifer, Alma. Yes, it could be used across content areas. Doesn't need to be just math. That's awesome. Okay, so just a reminder, there is an evaluation. And then at 7:50, I believe you guys are supposed to return to the main session for closing remarks. And I am available for any questions if any of you had any more questions. Thank you. I'm glad it was helpful for a lot of you. That's really exciting and encouraging to hear. Okay, no questions. Does anyone have any questions about any of the ideas I shared, maybe some of the books I shared? I'll go through and I'll put learning intentions and success criteria, teacher clarity playbook. I highly recommend that book too. It's like a workbook that you can learn how to break down those standards, write some learning progressions, and help students set good. A lot of the information I got was from the CAST website, which is dedicated towards UDL. And that's where I got the framework from. Those links are in the presentation if you want to click them and explore through them more. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast because it looks like there's not that many people, or stop sharing because it looks like we don't have any more questions. And you guys are free to start making your way towards the closing remarks in the main page. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you all so much for your positive comments as well. Yes, I will type the name of that book in the chat box.